Okay, so as Timo mentioned, I'm going to talk a bit about Azure policies and, well, showing something about those, and, well, yeah, that's about it. And of course, hard to talk after the previous presentation, but I try. But yeah, starting first from me. So, as previously I said, my name is Juho Saarinen. I work at Witted Mavericks, and, well, here are some kind of information. Maybe the one thing that is shown from the images is that I collect a bit of those different kind of certificates, and that list I think is now up to date.
But I mean, you have more AWS certificates than Azure certificates there.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I would say due to partnership, because my earlier employee has to get the partnership level, which required to also get those left side AWS certificates. So I first had those right side and then made the left side kind of just to get the numbers right. But yeah, so I have been consultant around 20 years, first testing and then moved more of DevOps and architecture side. Kind of have a bit bad feeling of testing because many customers at that time thought that when you are a tester, you don't talk about code, you don't talk about architecture, you don't talk with the developers, you just test. And usually, well, you know what that means. And not really kind of, I would say, IT background as a studies sense. So made some physics, mathematics, some courses of computer science, but mostly these other natural sciences. But yeah, that's about me, and we can move to the main thing. So first about Azure policies. And well, in simple way, they are way to ensure the compliance of the resources and things at the Azure. And they can audit things, they can block things, they can mutate things before the deployment. And then if something is deployed, they can also automatically remediate the issues there. And they are not only, of course, most they are automatic, so you don't want to prevent something bad to happen, but there are also possibility of the manual kind of proof that someone says that yes, we are done everything according to the book, and stamp it, and then we have kind of nice looking list from the portal that okay, things are okay now, and this team has to do something because they haven't signed with their blood that things are working like should. But there are some, I would say, catches which were initiators, so to speak. So when something is denying you, when some policy is deployed which denies things, it works immediately. So after the deployment, the non-compliant things are denied. But if something is at audit mode, it might take 24 hours to refresh the statuses. And then those who think even a bit of testing might start to think how fast these things that might take 24 hours to refresh. And for the developers, the policies are JSON formatted, and basically they compare the JSON formatted resource definitions with the rules and then act according. There are some functions. They have limited possibility to go outside of the specific resource. So, for example, if I'm checking this virtual machine, I can see some information of the resource group. I can see some information from the management group subscription, but it's quite limited. So it's not kind of thing that if this and this, that's kind of this resource and this resource, they don't, at least easily, can be done. And yeah, Microsoft has a lot of ready-made policies. It's just a matter of how those are configured. And also custom can be made. But in simple sense, they are just kind of rule engine rules. And that's other thing what kind of, well, made me think about if things can be done better way. And yeah, one catch which especially is kind of not so nice with the developers is that the policies, of course, can refer exactly the resource JSON fields, but there's also a list of aliases. So one alias can mean different things with different resources. And basically, for the code that I wrote, the alias list is about 10 megabytes. 10 megabyte CSV, which has 4 columns. So quick calculation might kind of give a hint how many lines there are. But yeah, so a bit small, but basically policy definition is something like this. The example is actually from Azure built-in, so those who know Azure probably know it by heart, and other ones just can facepalm or something like that. And as I mentioned, the thing is that the alias is here. So for example, this example checks the virtual machine scale sets, and something else. And it refers to some kind of short looking fields. But these fields have different meaning for each and every of these resources. So, well, as I said, it's quite messy thing when started to think. It's kind of that those who know. But yeah, that's kind of the background of the policies. So now everyone about know what they are. So what if we need to either configure or develop those? So first of all, we have different kind of objects in this policy landscape. We have the definition that you saw just before there. It tells which resource to check, what are the criteria, and what should happen if the criteria are met. So basically if clause. Then there are initiatives, which are also called policy set definitions, which collect many of those definitions together. So if we, for example, want to check some virtual machine things, we probably have to include multiple definitions. And why we want to use the initiative there is because the only one of these 3 objects, the initiative is only one which can contain multiple definitions. Assignment is only one. So we don't want to assign 1,000 policies one by one. We want to assign one initiative which contains those 1,000 policies which affect the same thing. And of course, if company has some cloud control framework, there might be some mystical IDs, like this is networking, this is security. The initiative is easy way also to kind of combine the policies with those. And the assignment, of course, can be made to multiple levels, so it can be scope to resource group, subscription, management groups, or the tenant level. And now, again, a kind of sneak peek of the testing. Normally, I would say companies doesn't have multiple tenants. So if there is some policies that are deployed to tenant level, and you have only single tenant, and you mess up the policy definition so that it blocks creation of crucial resources, well, Azure way is that deploy it and check how it works. Hopefully you can revert back quite quickly. And yeah, then the policies also, as said, they can do multiple things. They can be disabled. Well, like it's not in use. They can't append or modify or mutate the calls that user makes so that the resource gets kind of, it changed. For example, add some blocks for the network security groups, changes basically OS for the VMs. You try to deploy Linux. No, you don't. You deploy always Windows. That's it, kind of things. Probably no one would do something like that. Basically, that's possible for the policies. Then and these are in order. So in this order they are evaluated. Then after the mutation, it's the deny hits, because of course we shouldn't deny the call that might be mutated. So only after mutation the things are denied if it still hits to these rules. Then audit is kind of obvious, collecting the things, just knowing if things are compliant or not. Basically not acting for those directly. Then manual, like I said, the possibility to require someone manually said that we are done everything by the book. Then a bit kind of more, I would say, special cases or special effects, audit if not exists. So basically if something is missing from the resource definition, it audits and notes that this is only audit, this doesn't deny, it just audits. And then the deny action, which sounds nice and very kind of useful, except that it doesn't work anything else than it can prevent the deletions. It can prevent any other actions, but Microsoft has maybe thought it a bit wider because the deny action is not deny deletion. But then if some action, some resource, some kind of resource needs to be, or policy needed for the auditing or denying, how it's done? Well, first of course, it would be best to check if Microsoft has something offered already. So not starting to write those horrific JSONs and thinking how to test those. Kind of hint, there isn't any other testing than this deploy, try, and hope kind of thing. So Microsoft doesn't offer any, I would say, testing frameworks. Again, we go there later, but that's the case. Then there is, normally you can see some information of the policies from Azure portal, but maybe that tells about the usefulness that there is separate web page, AC Advertiser, which is basically the tool to check what policies are doing what and how they should be used. So maybe it should hint maybe Microsoft a bit about the usefulness of the portal for this kind of use cases. And if there isn't suitable policy for built-in ones, then of course self-made policies can be made self also. And of course, if there's multiple policies needed, then initiatives, etc. So parameters, scope has to be taught, and then as said, this especially when writing the custom policies, if you are not fully committed, fully used Azure for some time, those aliases are kind of, well, strange thing. Of course, if you are only targeted to one resource, you don't have to use the aliases. But for example, this virtual machines, because you have virtual machines, you have scale sets, and you probably want to make the policies that hit to both. The only way to do those without copy pasting would be to use the aliases. Yeah, and as I said, highlighting one alias can have multiple meanings depending on what resource is defined at the first criteria of the policy. So, when the policies take the tools, we first select or write the definition or definitions we want to use. If there's multiple, we need initiative. Then we have to think what parameters the policy has, or what parameters has to be set to the policy, because of course quite often there are default values, but they are not the ones you probably want. And then the scope, as said, if you deploy deny policies to tenant level, that's quite bold. Especially at Friday code on kind of deployment. Then when the definition or definitions are done and initiative is needed are done, then the assignment according to the scope and the parameters that just are kind of planned, deploying the assignment, and then the main thing, the verification. So if you have denied policy, as said, it's easy to check. It immediately starts to block. So you just try to create some non-compliant, compliant resource, check that things work. If so, good. Of course, again, testing mindset hits. If I do two kind of resource deployment, does it mean that there is no regression? Does it mean that I haven't blocked anything that should be able to be deployed? Or is there some kind of corner cases that allows the deployment, even I think that it shouldn't? And this comes especially when making the initiative with multiple definitions. So are those kind of working together as should? And auditing, yeah, technically same thing, except for the 24-hour delay. There are commands to trigger the update, but they are not kind of, I would say, rockets either. Those also take kind of minutes, and when thinking of the testing of these kind of things, you know basically immediately, or should know immediately if it's okay or not wait to trigger some run, which runs maybe 5 minutes. And yet then the mutation, kind of same thing. The good thing is that mutation also starts to act immediately. So immediately after deployment, resource deployed, hitting the policy would mutate or should mutate, and then it can be checked that is it mutated accordingly. And yeah, so kind of in simple way, deploy policy, assign kind of specific scope, and try to create resources with compliance and non-compliant way. But like how simple it sounds, but then there comes these structure issues, I would say, the levels, if the scope is tenant is quite big, if the scope is management group, still is your company who has Azure in use available management group structure that doesn't kind of allow the testing, so it has enough subscriptions, enough different kind of subscriptions, for example, or are you using basic production management groups, which then inherits easily the things? So basically same kind of blast radius can having the tenant level things. And then the bad case scenario also, if your policy is incorrect and you, let's say, deploy Kubernetes cluster, oh, it should have been denied, but now I'm waiting 1 hour. Kubernetes cluster is on, and then 1 hour to remove that Kubernetes cluster, or Microsoft SQL, or kind of some other these resources that have quite long time to provision and deprovision. Because of course you don't want to leave that kind of resources running there. But that's quite, I would say, maybe boring to just talk about that. So let's see if I'm able to show something here. Trying to hit the correct thing. Yes, and then taking the screen somewhere. Now I try to now yell, because it's much easier to have both hands available. Dun, 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 dun. Now, yes. So, I just for the preparation, I created the one resource group and one one managed identity. And now what I also would do, I would create single federation for the management group. So maybe the name also tells why this is created. But basically, I have now one, because now I don't have any policies deployed related to this. So this, like I said, see, the deployment was okay. Then I can take one initiative. It's, as seen, Microsoft loves the UID, so everyone sees immediately from that UID what it is. and those who don't, that initiative contains the federation, built-in federation policies. So allowing to deny or allow federations towards, for example, Azure DevOps, GitHub, AKS. It combines those. And I deploy it to the scope of the resource group. And like I said, the policy assignment needs two things. Usually it requires scope always, and then it requires parameters. And now, it's nicer to check things with deny mode because it's immediate. And then I create the policy assignment. And now I have that specific policy with specific, that initiative with specific parameters deployed to the resource group as the scope. And then I can try and check if I make basically the same with different name, but otherwise this is exactly the same resource. And now what it should happen, it very user-friendly tells that no, you don't. Because of this policy, somewhere here mentions management federation credentials be approved types from approved federation sources. So, like I say, user-friendly way. But now of course the thing is that what's the problem then? And yet the ACID advertiser in this case would say, okay, there are different federations or the federations by default are false, so they're not allowed. But because I deployed this specific kind of federation, the deny also works as audit for the existing resources. Except, no, it doesn't, because as said, it might take 24 hours, the audit mode, to and now if kind of thinking of the IT in mind, the scope is resource group, which has single resource, and still it might take 24 hours that Azure would tell that single resource in that single resource group is non-compliant. Yes, it's about the kind of scale of the Azure, but still thinking of one single element in very specific scope. And yet there is basically a way, as said, to trigger these things manually. But again, we have single resource group with single resource. And I think that I could say that quite many times while that progress goes on. So the audit mode, the same time, so the audit mode testing, well, it might be a bit hard. But even though it didn't succeed or end, it might be that, wrong command. It might be that actually it wasn't. So like seen, auditing is not there yet. And then now, of course, we can have this so now we allow GitHub as a federation source, and this then because we changed the policy, the parameters, we just update the assignment. And now, if things are like they should, I should be able to deploy new federation for the GitHub. And because the parameters I put somewhere here, we see that the allowed GitHub repo owners, only allowed org is allowed. So the example one, previous one had the organization allowed org, and then if having this other org, which is not allowed, then denies again user-friendly way told. And basically this I would say could continue. I have also other example, because now this was just about the parameters. But then if I would create custom policy, then this kind of come a bit harder even. I have custom policy which I have to test, and the format is not really user-friendly because there's no IDE helping me to fulfill that policy format. It's just basically, it's just text. It's nothing more than, it's JSON, but it's text. It's not kind of context. There's no context awareness or anything. Let's see if I quickly deploy the other one. Okay. Oh, yeah. So I have prepared this. Okay. Oh, that was then wrong. Let's see. Yeah. So now I have deployed new policy which kind of denies pull request if the environment subscription level tag called environment says production. So basically, don't put PRs to production. And now, because that was the custom policy, I had to first deploy the definition. Then I deploy the assignment. And then I try to deploy to this subscription which has tag environment production. I try to deploy this pull request federation. And now it fails. And now there is some kind of somewhere tag checking policy assignment. Well, that name, but it shows that it's not Microsoft thing. So basically now it's easy for deny. But now if I would have to make some changes here, I probably want to audit this first. And then we are back to this point that it's quite hard to get the audit results visible. And I think that now we should have a couple of the non-compliant resources, because the original one that I created was with pull request. And yeah, now we have some information here. The point is not about how many these are, but just that we know that we have federations that are non-compliant, and now they are visible at the audit sense. Yeah, but that's I would say is the oops. So that is kind of, let's say, traditional. That's normal way. If not thought about the kind of anything further, because as I said, there is no tools offered to make this any nicer way. So wouldn't it be nice to verify these things that I showed with the CLI before the deployment, or even before the merge to the kind of main branches? So basically, like I would say normal software development kind, that you have PR, you have tests there, then you deploy, you merge to main, you deploy to somewhere and make some, let's say, longer lasting tests like these ones. But now, current approach is that you just have to deploy something, so you have to have something to deploy to, and then these scopes are quite tedious in a way. So, repeating myself, there is no tooling offered by Microsoft to do any testing of the policies. The thing that I showed is basically described also the MS Learn, how you develop policies. There is one kind of proof of concept kind of way to verify policies. Funny thing is that actually Janne Mattila is, or at least was, Microsoft employee, but apparently he hasn't been able to kind of push the idea forward. But yeah, so I find that it's some C# thing. It's made kind of very if-else kind of clauses. So there's a POC sense with very specific policies, but not generally. But in a way, as said, the Azure policies are kind of rules, and we have multiple rule engine implementation across different languages, like rules, for example, in Java. And no worry, I don't speak about Java. That's something that usually people know. But if we have the rules and rule engine, couldn't that kind of solve the issue of locally testing things? And what I tried, yes, it would. So I wrote a custom Golang application using the Gruul rule engine. So, like those who know Go, most of the Go packages start with G because for Go rules. And what is nice is that actually this rule engine can be extended with own functions. So the rules can contain function calls, and the functions are kind of at the same, very fast to execute also. And even nicer way with this one was that the policies were able to be presented in a JSON format. So it was quite easy to start converting or it was thought that it would be quite easy to convert policy definition JSON to this Gruul JSON and then inject those to rule engine. And what else this tool does, it downloads those missing definitions or initiatives from the ACID advertiser. Because as shown, we can usually, when developing the policies, especially when using the built-in policies, you don't necessarily even check the policies what are in the initiative. It is enough that you know that, okay, this initiative solves my issue. And yeah, so it creates a JSON, then when the rule engine is on, it takes each one resource at a time and tells if the policies or rules it knows affect to those resources. And yeah, so disclaimer, very proof of concept still. Some policy functions are supported, but because you can do very exotic things, I would say, with the functions inside the policies. I can say that some are supported. Some that I have tested, I have fixed at same go. So yeah. And currently it's not in that sense testing tool because it doesn't make the return goes other than 0 all the time. I mean that if you expect that this resource would be denied and it's audited, it's printed of course that yeah, now I audited this, but it doesn't fail the build. So that kind of testing evaluation in sense is not there. But I think that's the, I would say, boring part. So again, same thing. We have this JSON policy here. And one thing actually interesting about the policy is there's the mode. By default it's indexed. And indexed means that it only affects the resources which have tags and location. And like federations, of course, doesn't have those, so there's also all mode and handles all resources. And when that previous policy JSON was converted to rule, it looks something like this. It might be a bit more readable depending on the policies and usage of the functions, and then the 10 clause is mostly it's basically 3 lines of or it's more of kind of debugging information, I would say. Kind of what effect would be if this would be created. But maybe it's nicer to see than just read from the slides. So let's see. Getting back to terminal. So basically, I have now this FIC limit issuers. That's the same initiative that I deployed manually first. So, and as you see, I have the same parameters here. Allow federated credentials true, and effect is deny. And now, when I run it, it first loads those policies that are at the initiative, and then it puts there, as you see, testing file is basically the resource definition. So it loaded 3 different policies to base, and then it shows that, okay, each of these is denied with the specific policy. And of course, now you know the reason is because I only allowed at parameters the federations. I didn't explicitly allow any source of the federation, because of course, why not? Why? If I allow federations, of course, I would presume that it means all. But no, each and every source of the federation is separating. But now I immediately saw that my parameters are wrong. In Azure, yeah, it was quite fast because this is deny, but still I had to make the deployment, which is not necessarily fastest thing on earth. But now, if I allow the GitHub and run exactly same resources through, okay, now only one of those failed, because as the name says, it's the AKS federation, and I didn't allow AKS federation. But now I got immediately feedback that, okay, this one resource wouldn't be allowed, and in my case it's okay because I didn't want to allow the AKS federations. And there are kind of some of these built-in policies have these kind of interesting things. For example, in this case, if I don't define any allowed organization, it means that all organizations are allowed. So kind of other way around than if I don't say allow GitHub, it's denied. But if I don't give any allowed organization, it thinks that everything is allowed. So these are not necessarily always kind of logical in a sense. But then if I say that, okay, like in demo, allowed GitHub repo owners, only the allowed org is allowed, and still effect is denied, we can see that it changes. Now the last one, which is maybe so now better, so managed identifier from GitHub must be from trusted repository owners. This is the other org, which is not allowed org, so it fails. And then if I add that production kind of pull request not from towards production rule in, so as you see the initiative name is now FIC limit issuer and subject, I see that there are now kind of the biggest thing compared to Azure is that in Azure you get only one deny. So in a kind of thinking of this regression thing, if you have some policy hiding the other policies, you don't know if those other policies would affect if for some reason that first denying policy is removed. That kind of testing you can do, because then it's denied, that's it. It might evaluate at the background, but it doesn't tell it. So basically telling this information that this last GitHub federation with tags to get with the deny mode. Of course, with audit mode you can get it if you if you wait. So again, it would be, I would say, for regression tests also, at least for me, this kind of information is much more crucial than knowing that, okay, I can't create the federation, because if now this first policy would be dropped, how I can say that this last one is actually hitting? Here I can say it, but at Azure I basically would have to somehow allow this first policy first, so that the second one is hit. Yeah, so basically I would say that was it. The repo mentioned is not yet public. I'm going to change it after this talk, and it's going to be found there. But as said, disclaimer, still it's kind of POC, it's evaluation. But if there's kind of someone thinks that this would be useful, at least I think that this is would be quite easy way to make the policy development more like software development and not just some kind of black magic kind of thing. And then there is the blog post from Janne Mattila about this, his implementation, and stating, I would say, quite same things at the blog post, that how hard it is, how slow it is, how brittle it is to handle these Azure policies. But yeah, that's